audience. So Lisa has vast experience in the agri-food sector, having spent more than 20 years working in the industry in a variety of different roles. More recently, Lisa headed the Agri-food division of Promar International with a focus on client engagement, business development, project delivery, implementing systems, PR and team management. Lisa has dealt with project management and direction of a range of assignments in the fresh and processed horticultural sectors, as well as the pork, dairy, poultry and beef sectors, with clients from across the supply chain operators, government departments, levy bodies, organisations in both the UK and globally. So Lisa, it's over to you. Panellists, once again, please make sure you're off of mute and your videos are on. I do just want to make a final note before this session starts to say that we are aware that the chat function that we thought that our audience and delegates could use in the right-hand panel is unfortunately not available. This is something we're continuing to look into, but please do continue to ask questions in the question bar, make your chat and comments there, and please do continue to use Twitter and hashtag AgriConnect2020. So it's over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. Good morning, all. Good morning, panelists. As with technology, we appear, and we've been doing really well this morning, but we appear to not have one of our panelists with us. But I'm going to introduce him anyway, because I'm hoping that he is going to be able to join in. And you'll see that Philip also hasn't got his camera on, and that is because he is out of the country. So we also have some other technology areas that we've had to overcome for this. So firstly, just to introduce the panel. So we have Phil Wilkinson, who's an industry expert. Phil has a vast career spanning dairy, meat, and working for many companies including Arla, Grampian and Two Sisters Group. He was awarded an OBE for his services in the dairy industry in 2003, and upon leaving the dairy sector, Phil became the MD of Grampian Food Group's integrated chicken business, and in 2006 he joined Two Sisters. He's also a director of the Red Tractor Poultry Sector Board, British Poultry Council, and serves as a vice president and council member of AVEC. Also chairman of Greengage, a lighting and sensor company for the poultry and swine industry, who's also an Agri-EPI member, and is also director of Paramount 21, a privately owned seafood company based in the UK and Australia. Wilkinson is the chairman of also Betabugs, an insect genetics company, and is a newly appointed as director of MHP, a poultry, animal feeds and crop growing company based out of the Ukraine. Philip, with all those roles, I'm surprised we've managed to get you for the 45 minutes that we have today, but welcome. And moving on to James. James Hague is Marketing Director for ForFarmers. James worked in the dairy research for the UK government and King's Hague Independent Farmer Funded Research for over 10 years. He's researched aspects from ruminant nutrition through to grass varieties. He's also developed Tracker, an online milk prediction and monitoring tool with hundreds of users across New Zealand, Australia and the UK. Tracker has continued to evolve, providing day-by-day dairy costs to monitor feed margins and feed conversion efficiency. James is currently the Marketing Director for ForFarmers, an international feed company that offers total feed solutions for conventional and organic livestock farming, with sales of over 10.1 million tonnes of feed annually, employing 2,600 employees. Now, whilst Professor Andrew Fearne isn't on the call, I do hope that he does. Oh, you here?
Oh, you can hear me. Sorry, my camera's not working, but you can hear me. Good. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. We have been waiting for you, Andy, so I will continue. No. I will continue to introduce you. So, Professor Andrew Fearne is Professor of Value Chain Management at Norwich from the University of East Anglia. His role is focused on the coordination of value chains from field to fork. He is founding editor of the International Journal of Supply Chain Management, author of over 100 articles, and the 14th Adelaide Thinker in residence, and also son of a Kentish pig farmer. Welcome to you all. It's a pleasure to have you all on this panel session to discuss the role in the agri-food supply chain that Agri-tech has. So you will see that you just see myself and James's cameras. We will be looking for participation from all panel members. And I'm really looking forward to a very interesting discussion on this topic. So we heard earlier from Tom that in March, for the first time as consumers, we went into grocery stores and we didn't know if our food was available. And on some occasions, we were restricted with how many items we could buy. We all know that the supply chain operates in just in time, and therefore there is little room for error. One would think, therefore, that there is most certainly a role for Agri-tech within the supply chain. But let's start big picture. There's a need to produce more from less, whilst protecting the countryside and enhancing the environmental and social benefits. As a food sector and as a food supply chain, how can we achieve this? Bill, I'm going to start with you.
Can you hear me okay? Because I can't see myself or anyone else. So I just want to make sure that you can hear me loud and clear.
I can hear you loud and clear, Phil.
Okay. Well, thanks very much indeed. Sorry you haven't got a screenshot of me, although I think you've got a photograph on there, which is probably more flattering than real life would have been in any event. Yes, what a great industry to be in at present. When you look around you, and you alluded to the COVID-19 crisis, you know, I wouldn't want to be in the aerospace industry or in car manufacturing and so on at this time, but in the food industry, albeit that we've had our problems and we're still enduring those problems right now. It's a great industry to be in, and feeding people is a great honour for anyone in the food industry to be in. And you sort of alluded to can we meet the challenges? Historically, we've met the challenges. Just to give you a feel for it, back in 1940, it took 19 farmers or one farmer to feed 19 people. In 1970, it took one farmer to feed 73 people, and currently it takes one farmer to feed over 200 people. So you know we're in a great place in terms of seizing opportunities and seizing opportunities that technology, genetics, and all those sorts of improvements bring. And again, just to sort of give you a feel for the poultry industry, which particularly in the UK is the largest of the meat proteins. It's 49% of the market, as opposed to 23 beef, 18 pork, and then 10 for lamb. You know, we are feeding so many people every day, and we talk about a 9 billion population globally in 20 years' time. If we seize the opportunities that are out there with not only technology but also genetics and improvements in efficiencies and stockmanship, then I'm very, very comfortable that we'll be able to meet those demands. And just again to give you a feel for the progress that we've made, back in 19 1976, it took something like 14 minutes to earn the price of a dozen eggs. In current climate, it takes less than 7 minutes of an average working person to earn the price of a dozen eggs. And from a chicken perspective, in 1976 it took 43 minutes to earn the price of a whole chicken. In 2020 it's 17 minutes. So we're making a lot of improvements there, and the consumer has undoubtedly benefited in that space. 25% of income was spent on food back in the mid 1970s. It's less than 10% now. So food is great value for money and becoming greater value for money, and that is as a result of the improvements that have been made through investments, through startup companies, through innovation, and through being far more efficient. Maybe I'll pause for breath at that stage.
Yeah, that's great. Loads of facts and figures there, Phil, and clearly you've demonstrated that the sector has progressed and improved. James, what are you seeing from an input supplier point of view?
Also, I mean, we work across like dairy, beef, sheep sectors, and then I'm on the ruminant side of the business. So we've got colleagues that do the pig and poultry, but it's common to all. And I think it comes down to understanding how the machine works, doesn't it? Understanding how all the levers of the agricultural business can pull together, because as we, you know, we had trying to produce more from less, it's our understanding of how best to drive that machine. I often use an analogy of ploughing a field. To do a really good job of ploughing a field, you have to keep looking backwards, you have to keep readjusting, and it's knowing when to tilt that body over, when to shorten the top link. It's understanding how the farm businesses work, each of those enterprises works, to know what we can put our efforts in to make the biggest benefit. And data is absolutely key to the heart of that, to be able to model and to understand, you know, what the consequence of those changes has been.
Yeah.
But I'm very much one for I want it all, and I think that if we're looking for profitability in the sectors, that profitability can also bring environmental benefits, because without the money we can't make the right decision at the right time. But to get the money, we need to have more output from less inputs, which should bring efficiencies again, so like financially, and lead us so we can have a much smaller carbon footprint within what we've got.
Yeah, great. Andy, what do you think?
So maybe I can add a dose of devil's advocacy here, because it seems to me that yes, I'm proud to be part of this industry. It's a great industry to have worked in and to be working in. It's an honour to be serving it. The trouble is, you know, integrity, honour, passion doesn't pay the bills, and so we're unequivocally in a race to the bottom, and there's nothing that either Philip or James has said to suggest otherwise. So one sector's progress in terms of efficiency is another's fundamental threat. So for example, the other proteins can't compete with poultry. So you know, getting more from less is fine, as long as at the same time there are enough people that are willing to pay for the return on investment that's required if that's going to happen. And because the focus is unequivocally, I think both James and Philip mentioned the word efficiency several times. I think I heard either of them mention once the notion of effectiveness or adding value. But the assumption was that if you're more efficient, you will become more profitable. And I'm afraid that simply isn't true, because profit is revenue minus cost. If you focus on efficiency and you reduce your cost through the adoption of technology and the more effective use of data to help you allocate your resources more efficiently, you only make more profit if the price stays the same, or indeed goes up. Well, guess what? Prices are tumbling, output prices are tumbling faster than input costs. So this is a race to the bottom, unequivocally. It's not sustainable. And we talk platitudes about getting more from less, and that's what everybody wants. No one's willing to pay for it. Nobody. Consumers don't care enough. Governments cannot legislate. We're heading for the most horrendous recession. And we should wake up and smell the roses, or rather something else that comes out of the rear end of a pig, because that's what it's going to smell like in about 6 months' time. Now, that's not to say that technology isn't important. Of course it is. But in this world, the elephant in the room is profitability. No one is making any money outside of the top 5–10% of farmers, outside of the largest, most efficient producers and processors, distributors and retailers. And even the world's largest retailers are about to spill blood on the high streets trying to survive. That's going to put relentless pressure on the supply chain. I struggle to understand what is the motivation to invest if all you see is prices going one way, which is south, when your costs are going another way, which is north, and your ability to embrace technology is fundamentally constrained. So data is critical, but who has the skill set to use it? Hardly anybody. Are they interested? Are they able? No, they're not. Why? Because the future is dire. Jeepers, that's a dose of depression, isn't it? But I just, you know, the counter argument is it's not all rosy. In fact, it's very, very bleak, and it's hard sometimes to be positive. Technology has a role to play, but we can't ignore the wider macro forces that are driving this industry down.
Lots of messages within that answer there, Andy. How can we turn that about? What can we do as a sector? I agree that we are going through a lot of challenges, and we have for a number of years within the supply chain. But is there a role for Agri-tech to help? And I know you've said, we've mentioned the word efficiency and operating efficiently, and then operating efficiently will bring additional profit into the business and allow that company to invest. Is there more that can be done there, and how do we do that as a sector?
So a couple of things before I hand back to James and Philip. So one is that I think the industry is still fundamentally siloed. So each link in the chain, input suppliers, primary producers, manufacturers, distributors, retailers, are operating without a holistic view of what sustainability really means. So we still need to become much more collaborative, because with collaboration, the data that is there's data everywhere, for goodness sake, but people don't want to share it, because actually they believe that sharing exposes them to exploitation. They can't see the benefit of making information and data freely available. The data providers, these global giants making machinery and then adding bits, gadgets to enable farmers to access that data, simply don't help with the interpretation. So just having the data alone isn't enough. We need supply chain partners to be sharing the data, so there's one version of the truth, and adding value to that data. You add value by identifying opportunities for adding value to outputs and services, and opportunities for saving cost. We're still light years away from being the collaborative supply chain that we need to be in order to deliver more for less.
Philip, working in that supply chain. Philip?
Sorry, I lost you. You went dead then, Lisa. Can you? Yeah.
Just following up on Andy's comments with regard, we're still not being collaborative within the supply chain. How do we build that up? We recognise that data is extremely valuable, but we're still not sharing it. How do we help with the interpretation of data?
Well, I'll come on to that, and happy to do that. I will just comment on Andrew's comments, in that up to a point I share his views on it is difficult to remain profitable, not only in the COVID climate but also in the current climate, in any event, as costs continue to mount. But I have to say that I'm not quite so depressed about it as perhaps Andrew is. And you know, okay, we alluded, or I spoke particularly about poultry, but I have been involved and am involved in other proteins as well. But I do see poultry as being an absolute winner in this process. And as I've already alluded to in my opening piece, you know, poultry businesses are profitable businesses in many cases, and possibly in most cases. However, we are seeing an enormous amount of industry consolidation, and Andrew uses the word race to the bottom. I mean, I don't consider it to be a race to the bottom. It is about efficiency, and Andrew, it is about adding value, and we take a pride in the businesses that I'm involved in trying and successfully trying to add value to the basic poultry offering. On the point that you raised, Lisa, with regard to collaboration, at the end of the day, we've got to be a little bit careful here on collaboration within the industry, in that we are a industry that is competing with other companies. So we've got to be very careful where that collaboration starts and finishes, in that we don't fall foul of any regulations on fair trading and so on. But prime examples of where the industry has cooperated has been with regard to salmonella reduction over the years, to such a degree that we're up there in the top of Europe in terms of salmonella within the product. In fact, it is no longer really an issue at all. We've also collaborated across the whole of the industry and across Europe on Campylobacter. So, you know, there are areas where we are able to collaborate on animal welfare policies, on the movement of cattle or poultry, where we are collaborating. So, you know, there are lots of areas where we are able to collaborate, and do collaborate with the same organizations that we're maybe knocking lumps out of each other with in Tesco or Sainsbury's or Asda. So, but we do embrace those, we do embrace collaboration opportunities when it is legal to do so, and I am certainly not I'm involved in businesses in both the UK and in continental Europe and in Australia, where we are investing millions and millions and millions of pounds in integrated businesses up and down that supply chain. And we are not doing that because we think that we're into a race to the bottom. We're doing that because A, we think that we're good at what we do. That is our core competency. We think that we're good at feeding people with product at what is great value for money. And I think what Andrew didn't allude to in his piece is that as the world gets bigger, also it's getting, in many parts of the growing populations of the world, getting much wealthier as well. So the opportunity for meat protein to be consumed by people that hitherto have not enjoyed that opportunity is immense. 90% of global growth is in the emerging markets, 60% of which is in Asia. As far as the EU is concerned, 1.4 million tons more poultry meat is required in the next 5 years. I'm not pessimistic, Andrew, about that. I'm very optimistic about it. I'm very optimistic about the opportunity that that presents us to feed those people. And remember, I mean, apart from COVID, and we put that on one side for the moment, people are living longer than they've ever lived before. They are healthier than they've ever been before. Now, I'm not saying that's entirely because of the diet and the food industry. It's as a result of massive achievements in the medical arena and elsewhere. But I've got to say this, we feel proud to be part of that supply chain, providing healthy food to healthy people at affordable prices, and hopefully making a profit in that process. And that's why I'm very, very optimistic about the industry that we're in. I'm very optimistic about the startups that I've had the honor to be asked to chair. And I have to say that the telltale signs, the early telltale signs of the opportunities for those startups in this arena also would support what I'm just saying, and that is that there is serious money available not only in Europe but also coming out of America for agri business. So the big players globally in agricultural investment for mainstream foods are very, very keen to invest in this space. And some of these guys like Bill Gates and so on, they're not doing this because they're going to lose money. They're doing this, one, because they see it as an opportunity, two, they see it because they're going to feed people, and three, they're going to do it because they feel that there's going to be a profit at the end of it. And I share that view, and I'm very excited and honoured to be part of this industry, taking it to its next stage of development.
Okay, that's great. James, do we collaborate or are we in competition with each other?
Oh, I think we can still collaborate. I think, I mean, I quite welcomed Andrew's opening statements there, because I think there are our part in the supply chain. There are things that we can influence, and there are things that we can't. There are things that will be influenced by, you know, Adam Smith's guiding invisible hand. The market will find its way, as long as the infrastructure within governments and policies there to allow it to run. But to be able to help those farmers that want to be in that race, whether it's to the bottom or not, but there are those that are very successful, those that do want to make money. Collaborating is going to be essential, because without that collaboration, we don't have the information we need to be efficient. You know, and I can only do what we can do working with the farmers that want to work with us, to help them to become more efficient, more profitable. You know, and we do make it a lot more profitable. We've got to work together with supply chain, make sure that distribution of the end price is fair along the way, because otherwise that supply chain breaks down. It's in nobody's interest to have no dairy farmers or beef farmers or sheep farmers. You know, the whole supply chain falls apart then. It's about making sure that supply chain is equitable.
Equitable supply chains, Andy, do you think they're equitable?
Yeah. It's a really difficult one, isn't it? I mean, there's it's the what would be ideal and what is reality, and I thought Philip's answer was fantastic, to be honest with you. And you know, it's great to have people with vision and passion and optimism, and I'm certainly not without that. It's just that if we take poultry as an example, I would just argue that you know, from a physical perspective, it's ripe for this industrial and innovation. It's much easier to automate. It's much easier to introduce robotics. It's much easier in a controlled environment, and the industry is already vertically integrated. It's the most convenient source of protein. It's the cheapest source of protein. Everybody, anybody can use it. So I think it's absolutely right to say that poultry is a winner. But how many poultry growers can we expect to enter the sector, and at what cost? So and I'll just pick up on on the kind of post-COVID world. I think it's a really important point that Philip's make, that, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we've got to be thinking about the next 6 months or 12 months as if that's the end of it all, because of course not. But there is a significant challenge around survival, and it's very difficult to think strategically beyond the next 12 to 18 months. But he is completely right. Unlike other sectors, we're going to have to. The world is going to be wanting more and more food for generations to come, and why shouldn't we be part of that? I'm going to say, well, because actually we're an island that's densely populated. The cost of labour is one of the highest in the world. The cost of land is one of the highest in the world. And whilst the new entrants that are coming in, game for collaboration, data literate and willing to collaborate all over the place, we've still got a huge long tail of incumbents who aren't any of those things. So you've got a massive challenge in terms of structural adjustment. So to get back to the question of fairness, and if you like, in collaboration, I think, Lisa, what we need, and this is potentially a role that the innovation centres can play, is lots more examples of the detail where collaboration pays, where collaboration horizontally with farmers can take out cost, vertically with processors, upstream and downstream input suppliers can save time, and can identify opportunities to add value. We all, me included, talk a lot about collaboration. I'm often asked a question, so give us the examples and tell us how it works, because the experience that so many upstream stakeholders have is that they go to collaborate, they want to collaborate, but they get an outcome that they don't deem to be fair. And that's where the data and the digitalization comes back, Lisa, because in order to get fairness, you have to have visibility. And there's unfortunately, downstream, the data that's available in abundance that reveals what people are willing to pay for different products, and that ought to be made available to everybody in that supply chain. Why is, just one last thought, why is blockchain so slow to progress in agri-food sector? Because there is no dam, and he swore then, there is no trust. Blockchain doesn't work if the people that are about to embrace that technology don't trust each other. You can't replace trust with blockchain, which after all is a guarantee that you're going to offer X and get back in return Y. That's not what happens currently. You thought you were going to get Y when you entered into this process, whatever that might be, and often the outcome is very different. I can see you nodding, so I'll shut up.
I was going to ask a question on blockchain when we were having a discussion earlier on, because we were talking about the challenges with data and the difficulties within the supply chain, and blockchain a number of years ago was going to be the saviour, and I haven't heard that much about it of late. I'm conscious that I'm just still on my question one, and I've got loads. No, that's fine. This is a really good discussion, so just keep it going. But I do want to address one question that's come through from Tom Slattery, and it's linked into what you just started talking about, Andy. So do the panel think that consumers would accept a reasonable increase in the cost of food up from 10% of average income if they know they are getting fresh, sustainable and ethically produced food? Phil, I'll start with your mind.
Yeah, well, we would love to think that, and in all the businesses that I'm involved with, we would like. I'll major on chicken again because it seems to have captured the weight of the conversation. But I mean, I spent 33 years in the dairy industry before I had a momentary lapse of concentration and got involved in the poultry sector. But to your point, yeah, I believe that there. Remind me what your question was.
So it's, do the panel think that consumers would accept a reasonable increase in the cost?
Happy that they are. We've been happy to be a one-stop shop for chicken, and whether they are prepared to pay more, I think this is about consumer choice. And I think from a supplier perspective here, working with our retail partners or our quick service restaurant partners globally, our job is to make sure that what we've got in terms of availability is what we're advised by the people who are the custodians of customers' goodwill in the form of those organizations that interface with consumers, that we've got a product range that enables people to pay their money and take their choice. So in our case, you know, if you want free range, you can have free range. If you want red tractor, you can have red tractor. If you want RSPCA, you can have RSPCA. If you want bog standard, you can have bog standard. So, you know, I think that what the industry must be prepared to do is to supply what the consumer wants. But I think the most important thing is, and this is where I am absolutely on Andy's page, and that is that it is not a race to the bottom, where what we do is we put in a lot of added value. That added value carries a premium in its infancy, but then when it becomes the norm, and up to a point Red Tractor has been guilty of its success there, you've got a premium for Red Tractor at the outset. Now it's 85% or 80+% of the market. That is the norm. That becomes the entry level, and therefore if you don't produce the Red Tractor standards, then it's like a market minus position rather than a adding value position. And we've got to be smart enough, and we've got to work with our retail customers to ensure that that doesn't happen, because if that does happen, then I'm more sympathetic to the opening remarks that Andy made, and he was pretty complimentary about my comments. I'll be complimentary about his, purely and simply because I think that that was a great opening comment that, Lisa, has got us into the debate that we've got us into, which I think is probably, with respect to you, far more worthy than trying to go through an agenda, because it's spontaneous. People are speaking from the heart and from the soul, and it's given us that opportunity to do so. But yeah, I think that whether they're prepared to go back from 10% of salary to 25% from that current time now back to 1976, different matter. But as long as when we provide choice, the price tiers reflect the cost of those added value offers, then I'm comfortable with that. When you're working on wafer thin margins, which we are in the food industry, I'd rather make 5% on £5 than 5% on £2. What I don't want to do is make my 5% on £5, but then end up only selling a third or a quarter of the volume, because what I've also got to maintain is factory throughput as well, because Andy, that's where the efficiencies are. It's you know, it's back to those efficiencies. And you know, even though you say, well, we still might not be able to make money, or we're not going to invest. Sometime since, when I've been involved in the poultry industry since 2003, and you're running birds through those lines at something like 5,000–6,000 birds an hour. The new lines now, you're running birds through at 15,000, 16,000 birds an hour. That in itself, you know, you've got significant cost savings. We've talked a little bit in this meeting about investment. The suppliers to the industry are able now to provide machinery that can debone chicken, debone red meat cattle without having all the labour standing shoulder to shoulder in those facilities. That there are serious savings to be made and efficiencies to be had in that space. So I'm of the opinion that end to end, from farm to fork, providing consumers have got the opportunities of having the product in front of them where they can take their choices and pay the premiums for the premium lines, but then get the staple diet for those who are not maybe as fortunate as us, then I think that we're doing a job and we're feeding the world, and that's what I think that we're capable of doing. I'll just finish on one little thing, Andy, which is what you said about being an island. We are an island, but let's say again in the chicken area or even in the dairy area, we don't necessarily consume the whole litre of milk. We didn't consume the whole bird in chicken, so we're white meat eaters, so we're exporting dark meat, leg meat, wing meat, and so on, all over the world, into the Indian Ocean, into South Africa, into the Caribbean, all over. So even though we are an island, we are a very efficient poultry producing nation, and one that the world looks up to, by the way. We've not touched on this, Lisa, in this piece. The world looks up to in terms of our animal welfare, our sustainability policies here. The world looks up to us. So not only are we able to feed all our people at great value prices, but we export as well. So we're an important export market, which is why we've got to get the Brexit situation right, and the government has got to get its shoulder to the grindstone on that to help us in that space from the 1st of January. But I'm very, very confident that we are going to be a serious player in this space going forward.
Okay, thank you. Andy, consumer choice, price tiers, margin.
Yeah, so and I'm conscious of the time, but just to add, I guess just to add a couple of points really. It's so for the last 15 years now, we've been looking at supermarket loyalty card data. So what people do rather than what they say. So behind the question, if you like, is that people will say one thing, they care passionately about where their food comes from and how it was produced, and of course they'll pay more if it's produced locally. That assumes that people are making decisions rationally in the supermarket or online, and they don't. So the evidence is overwhelming that people don't sit at their desks or at the point of purchase and make the decisions about which to put which of these incredible which products in this range of products that Philip quite rightly described they are willing to pay for. So and because retailers are competing in the same way that Philip is to maximize the turnover of products on their shelves, retailers are unwilling to participate in the fundamental challenge, which is to get consumers to think habitually that paying less for food is not in the long-term interest. Unfortunately, most of us are selfish. We don't care about the long term and thinking about ourselves in the short term, which means, Lisa, legislation is the only way for this circle to be squared. But which government has got the courage to launch a manifesto that within which sits a need to bring back retail price maintenance, bring back legislation that takes it out of the hands of the consumer. We can't rely on consumers to work out this complexity when they're losing their jobs and they can't afford to put food on the table, to say, oh yes, I understand that this is not good in the long term, therefore I will sacrifice X, Y, and Z to pay another 10% for my food. They will not, and neither Amazon or Tesco will allow them to, because they'll be fighting for market share. They'll be driving the prices down. They'll be removing the reason to think rationally. And just the last point, from all the data that we have, 10 years ago, 1 in 5, so that's 20% of consumers, when they're thinking about what to buy, had no interest in price. They were interested in quality, in provenance, in safety, integrity, in heritage. That percentage now is more like 17 or 18%. But back to the island, if you like, there's 60 million of us, and 16, 17, 18% of a 60 million population. That's still a significant niche to target. But the reality is the long tail, 80, 70, 60% of consumers will never wake up to the damage that's being done by pursuing the efficiency at all cost route. Legislation has to come.
And as you say, who will have the guts to do that? Right, yep. I'm conscious I'm just absolutely loving this discussion. There's a lot more that we could talk about. One has come in for you, Andy, and I'm going to put this to James as well. So what type of data model would work, which would bring transparency and would be based on trust, and which would harness cooperation? That's from Helen Glass. And I think maybe this comes on from the earlier conversation we had on blockchain and trust. So what data model would work for us?
I'll let James go first. Go on.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's, we see it's all done within milk contracts. Is that for those on manufacturing contracts, there's a monetization model there. So are we making the most of that within the framework that's been set by that dairy company working with the supermarket? And I think it really comes down to having a series of defined components of that piece of machinery and that supply chain, and does each part of it work? Because we can make some of those. We can make a farmer another 1.15 pence a litre on the average manufacturing contract just by manipulating milk composition, which is delivering what the processor needs to supply that contract. So we can work within that. That's within our sphere of influence. When that doesn't stack up, then you'd end up losing farms, and the industry will get to a critical point. Just coming back to the earlier situation, that the customer doesn't know what's at risk, so they won't necessarily pay for it. So the industry needs to have that view of what is a sustainable position, and to put that equitable, which is a real big picture that they need to understand every bit of the components, part of that supply chain. We see some of that happening in the marketplace now, but it's too fragmented. So it needs to be a lot more managed, and it probably is a role for government to do that. Too much of a lottery at the moment.
Okay.
And if I could add, Lisa. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you give a quick one? I was having so much fun, I didn't realise how far we'd run over. So yeah, give a quick response.
I'll stop if you like. But all I would say was, I think the dairy example is a great one, and it points to closed supply chains. So retailer A has their processors or their processor, and that processor has their then 100 or that group of farmers who, instead of playing the field, are then locked into, if you like, or committed to that supply chain. And in that supply chain, data should be shared. In the case of many of these supply chains, they're shared with a trusted third party, because the stakeholders in the supply chain don't trust each other. But that third party can then look at the data, can provide benchmarking information, which will show everybody in the supply chain where they sit, and particularly upstream, what my costs look like compared to the average or the best. And that stimulates conversations about, so how can we adopt more of the better practices that are enabling some of our colleagues, our producers, to produce at lower cost than I am. All I would add is, however, the bit that's missing in those closed loop supply chains, because to answer your question, what's a data model? The consumer data must be made available. The trouble is, at the moment, everybody wants to see what's happening upstream, where there's all that fragmentation and inefficiency, because they want to drive efficiency upstream to get the cost of the raw material down. That's what all the meat processors want, for example. Everybody wants lower cost ingredients. And how do you get lower cost ingredients? By driving the cost upstream down. So you're trying to get farmers to be more efficient. What none of them are willing to do is to share their own data. of the cost in the manufacturing plant or the cost in the retail, and indeed what consumers actually do. And that's what I struggle with. If you want visibility, let's see how everybody responds and the diversity of willingness to pay, the diversity of costs incurred throughout the supply chain. I still think we're still many, many years away from that happening.
Thank you ever so much. I want to thank all the panelists for all your contributions. We haven't even covered half the questions that even we had coming into the session, never mind the questions that have been coming throughout the session. I haven't got time to ask you for a summary of your thoughts, but I've picked up words, efficiency, vision, passion, mix of reality. We've certainly had that from you as a panel, well, this afternoon. Thank you ever so much. It's been extremely valuable.
Thank you, Lisa.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
No, thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thank you all. And thank you to Lisa for facilitating. So obviously an extremely passionate debate going on there. So we ran a little bit over time, but of course we don't want to stop anything too early when we've got such fantastic insight coming into the event. So that concludes our morning's policy sessions. I hope that you've all learned as much from these outstanding speakers in the morning as I have. It's always interesting to hear different perspectives